bow your head with me for a brief moment before the word this morning. Dear Heavenly Eternal God, as I stand before your people this morning, let the words of my mouth and the actions of my body be acceptable in thy sight. O our Savior and our Redeemer, let your will and your word go forward, no matter what I have prepared. In Jesus' name we pray. Let us all say, Amen. 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 Our text this morning comes from the book of John. It is John chapter 20, verses 1 through 18. I won't read it again for time's sake, but on this Resurrection Sunday, I want to talk a little about the subject, while it was still dark. Our text this morning tells the climax of the gospel story in about as understated as a way as can be imagined. Here there are no pre-dawn earthquakes, no soldiers fainting dead away. Like all four gospels, we have absolutely no description of the moment Jesus walked out of the tomb. Instead, John purposely keeps the story on the level of ordinary expectations, precisely so that when these typical expectations are shattered by the new thing God has done, our amazement and awe will be all the more great. The text begins simply, while it was still dark that first Easter morning. Mary Magdalene journeys to the tomb. People in the ancient Near East believed that a dead person's spirit remained in the vicinity of the tomb for 3 days. So they commonly visit the tomb during the first 3 days after a burial. However, in Jewish culture, Sabbath regulation prohibits such visits on the Sabbath. So the earliest Mary can visit is sundown that evening, which ends the Sabbath and begins the first day of the week. Mary is on her way to the tomb in the dark. It is not clear in John what she intended to do once she got there. But I suspect it was simply to mourn, to weep, and to pay her respects. We've all done that at the grave of a loved one. So we can identify maybe with the emotions swirling through Mary's mind at that moment. She notices the stones have been moved and apparently without any further checking, concludes that something isn't right. I imagine that if you and I went down to the cemetery to the grave of a friend or loved one, only to discover the headstone cracked in two and mounds of freshly dug dirt all over the place, I would bet serious money that none of us are jumping down in that hole to see if the casket is still there. Most of us, we hightail it out of there quick, fast, and in a hurry, and we're going to call somebody for some help. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Mary sees but fails to see what is going on. She makes assumptions based on her experience that bodies do not simply disappear. Presumably, the authorities have removed the body as part of their effort to erase Jesus' memory. Or perhaps grave robbers have stolen the body. To Mary, what happened was obvious. Since Jesus had been dead, and since Mary knew what dead looked like, and how undeniably Jesus had fit the bill that past Friday, if he wasn't in the tomb where they laid him, then somebody else had to have taken him because the dead wouldn't get up and move themselves. Peter and the other disciples make the same conclusion, albeit only after a bit more of a thorough investigation of the alleged crime scene. Taken together, verses 8 and 9 of the passage indicate that Peter and John and Mary did not stumble into the notion that Jesus had been raised from the dead. When John says he believes in verse 8, it is obvious the conclusion that something fishy and maybe even grisly had gone on. What follows is the now famous scene of Mary Magdalene weeping her eyes out over this latest indignity, visited upon a man that she loved. Jesus now incognito asked Mary why she is weeping. This is weeping the bitter forth of salty tears that has enveloped mankind throughout history. As I stated this week, I was reminded that while each gospel writer agrees that the resurrection of Jesus took place on the first day of the week, Matthew and Luke say the women go to the tomb at dawn. Mark says they went at sunrise, but John says it was still dark. There's a famous writer who reminded us that the darkest hour is just before the dawn. In the text, it is still dark. It seems that we're right where we ended on Friday, in the dark. John opened this magnificent chapter while it was still dark. And in a way, the darkness of death persists for us in this congregation throughout the world. In recent months, we've become more familiar with the instruments of death, as we've heard so much talk about war in Ukraine and mass shooting after mass shooting and people being killed simply because somebody wanted whatever it was the other person had. Yes. Indeed, lately, this whole world has seemed still dark in ways that we've seen over and over again, and in some ways that we've maybe not sensed in a while. In any event, whatever tentative conclusion the disciples drew at that moment, they are reported in verse 10 as simply going back home. Isn't this a striking way to tell the most important of Bible stories? Not one emotion is described. We are not told that they were happy or sad or confused or elated, curious or oddly uninquisitive. Nothing. They just went home. They don't even say goodbye to Mary. They just finally walk away and leave this woman to cry all by herself in the garden. Mary wept. We begin this chapter while it was still dark. But no matter how much higher over the horizon the sun had crept by this point in the story, there's a metaphorical sense in which the darkness persists. The very first emotion we have described to us is one of sorrow. She's bawling her eyes out. And this is where Easter begins. In darkness and lament, in confusion and the shadow of death. So then we ask the question, if everybody else went home, why did Mary start crying? For the same reason we cry when we see another unarmed black person gunned down in the street. For the same reason people are dying and suffering while we fight the same battles our parents and grandparents fought. Mary was crying because a preventable pandemic like COVID-19 was allowed to proliferate because of politics, while many of our friends and families suffered and died along the way. Jesus Christ asked this logical question out of a deep well of both compassion and empathy. Mary Magdalene on Easter morning is an emblem of the whole human condition. Mary said once every single one of us and the whole lot of us taken all together. And so it is precisely into that situation of dereliction that Easter must burst forth. Mary is among the dead, looking for one who's supposed to be dead, weeping over her loss in the dark. Things aren't always clear in the dark, as the disciples don't understand or believe what has happened. They're in the dark, so it's understandable that they do not see straightly or think rightly or hear accurately. Because even while it was still dark, we discovered that there's Easter light because Jesus works in the dark. When you may not see or recognize his presence, when you may be totally oblivious to what's happening around you, when you think he's forgotten you or that he's still dead, Jesus is at work in mysterious ways, leaving traces of his presence for us to see like an empty tomb, with linen wrappings just lying there. It was still dark, but Jesus, the light of the world, shines in the darkness. Darkness is not necessarily demonic, but a domain where we dare resurrection to happen, and resurrection does. Jesus' resurrection redeems the darkness and makes it a place of new life and hope. Jesus infiltrates the dark to reclaim darkness as a context for his ministry. In the dark is actually where we discover a new beginning. When it's dark, we think that it's all over, but in many ways for us, it's just a new beginning. Easter may ultimately be about things that are high, bright, light, and clear. But it begins in things that are low, dim, dark, and murky. Even in John 20, we are told right front that for Mary Magdalene, the day would eventually become known as Easter began while it was still dark. But what does all that mean? My brothers and sisters, Easter does not happen in bright, airy, and decked out in white church sanctuaries. And it's a good thing this year because many of us are still dealing with this, that, or the other due to the pandemic and losses of our families. My brothers and sisters, Easter does not happen in the places that there is bright and sunshine. Easter happens in the emergency room when the doctor comes out and shakes his head at us and tells us that our loved one didn't make it, that they couldn't save it. Easter happens at the funeral home when the first glimpse of our mother or father or brother or sister in that coffin hits us like a brick in the chest. Easter happens when we see somebody we love in front of a crack house and we know that there's nothing we can do to help. Easter happens on the nursing room floor when once strong-bodied men and women watch their peers disappear one by one. And where these wheelchair-bound precious people know that all of life has now come down to just waiting to die. Easter happens where death is, because that is the only place that Easter is needed. So Jesus today comes up from behind to ask, why are we crying? Why are we depressed? Why are we filling our veins with heroin? Why are you afraid that you too will end up in that wheelchair? Why are you sad? Every one of these questions has a logical answer. But that the truth of the matter is none of us cry without a reason. When we cry like Mary, there's a reason that hurts that made us cry. When we feel alone and that nobody else cares, then we see things going wrong and we feel powerless to stop it and change it. While we are standing like Mary in the dark, thinking that the story is all over. Mary had a reason to cry. She had an ironclad good reason to cry that morning. And had God not done a thing that day, which he had never done before, Mary's reason to cry would have been correct. That's why Jesus does not rebuke her for crying. There's no hint of knock it off or just stop that. Jesus himself knew that he and Mary both needed the tears if the truth of what happened was going to come to mean exactly what it still means. That we have the hope of new life, smack what we needed the most in the midst of a world of death and dying. In the midst of where things are the darkest for us. The text begins, while it was still dark. Many of us right now still find ourselves in places where it's still dark. Even though it's Easter on the calendar, the truth be told for some of us right now is still dark. We don't see no sunshine and no bright days. We may put on a good face and act like everything is all right. But the truth of the matter is, it's still dark. Yes. The thing that we held value in and loved the most seems to have been destroyed and gone to the wayside. And we're standing there figuring out, what are we supposed to do now? It's still dark for a whole lot of us. It's still dark for a lot of people that we love and care about. But what do you do while it's still dark? Do you just walk away like the disciples and say, it's all over? Do you weep and cry like Mary and then just wait for something else to happen? Mary cried because she didn't know what else to do. But then Jesus showed up. Oh, yes. They told her, you may have thought this was the end of the story. You may have been standing there watching as they put me on the cross and stretched me long and wide, and then I hung my head and died. But guess what? 3 days later, I walked up out of the grave. Oh, yes, yes. Jesus told him to tell her that the story was not over. And though while many of us right now feel as though we are still in the dark, Jesus has come by this morning to remind you that the story is not over. Yes. Right. Though you may not have physically been standing there when they killed Jesus on the cross, you know how the story ends. Yes. Though you still right now may be crying God will make it better in our lives and lives.
Amen.
Even while it's still dark.
Yes.
You just have to have the courage to hold on.
Yes.
As the old folks say, keep on keeping.
Yes.
Because if you look back over your life right now, you are not in the place that you used to be.
Hallelujah.
And though it has somehow become cliche these days, but the truth be told is still true, that if you look back over your life and think about where would you be if it had not been for the Lord on your side.
Yes. Yes.
I can't speak for nobody else. I can only talk about me. I know if it had not been for the Lord who was on my side,
Hallelujah.
I would probably be down there in a grave somewhere. There are times that there was nothing but God that told me, son, don't go over there. Don't do that. And sometimes I listened, and sometimes I didn't.
Hallelujah. Come on now.
But I'm glad that I listened more times than I did.
Yes.
Because God allowed me to still make it to see today. God allowed me to wake up this morning and still be where I wanted to be. And still do whatever it is I wanted to do. God gave me another chance to get it right before the journey really is over. Because no matter what, one day this journey is going to end for each and every one of us.
Yes. Yes.
At some point, the ride is here. Now, I ain't saying I'm ready for it to end yet. And I ain't talking about nobody else, but I ain't ready to cross the Jordan. And I thank God for not taking me just yet.
Hallelujah.
But I have to be honest that there are some times in my life that I'm still in the dark too. That I still wonder, Lord, am I doing the right thing? Am I doing what you would have me do in the ways that you would have me do? Lord, I know I'm not perfect, but I ask you to lead me and guide me, Lord. Show me the way that you would have me do it. Give me the strength to hold to your unchanging hand. When the world says all I need to do is let go and do whatever I want to do. Anything I'm big enough and bad enough to do, just go ahead and run out there and do it. But Lord, I thank you for giving me the discernment to say, no, son, that ain't no good for you. That everything that glitters ain't gold. That everything that looks good to you ain't good for you. I thank God for letting me get old enough to get some wisdom and some discernment. Because it's not a gift that is given to everybody. So this morning I challenge all of us to do better in the ways that we serve the Lord. To do better in the ways that we treat one another. Because that is what God would have us do. That while we are still in the dark, to do the best you can, to be the best human being you can be. No, you ain't gonna ever be perfect. I'm not perfect, you're not perfect, ain't nobody else perfect. But do the best you can to treat folk right and do the right thing as much as you can. And then God will know what you did. And when the journey does end, God will say, you've done well, my good and faithful son. And you will be able to walk down the streets of gold. You will be able to see the many mansions that the Lord has for you. You just got to hold on to do the best you can, to work and do what you need to do, to be the best person God gave you to be. Amen?
Amen.
Amen. So today is your day. The doors of the church are now open unto you. We all